Quiet Communion reads The Lady or the Tiger by Frank Stockton. In a very olden time there lived a semi-barbaric king whose ideas, though somewhat polished and sharpened by the progressiveness of distant Latin neighbors, was still large, florid, and untramaged, as become the half of him which was barbaric. He was a man of exuberant fancy, and withal of an authority so irresistible that at his will he turned his very fancies into facts. He was greatly given a self-communion, and even when he and himself agreed upon anything, the thing was done. When every member of his domestic and political systems moved smoothly into its appointed course, his nature was bland and genial. But whenever there was a little hitch, and some of his orbs got out of their orbits, he was blander and more genial still. For nothing pleased him so much as to make the crooked straight and crush down uneven places. Among the borrowed notions by which his barbarians had become semified was one of the public arena, in which by exhibitions of manly and beastly valor the minds of his subjects were refined and cultured. But even here the exuberant and barbaric nature asserted itself. The arena the king was built, not to give the people an opportunity of hearing the rhapsodies of dying gladiators, nor to enable them to view the inevitable conclusion of a conflict between religion, opinion, and hungry jaws, but for purposes far better adapted to widen and develop mental energies of the people. This vast amphitheater, which its encircling galleries, its mysterious vaults, and its unseen passages, was an agent of poetic justice, in which crime was punished or virtue rewarded by the decrees of an impartial and incorruptible chance. When a subject was accused of a crime of sufficient importance to interest the king, public notice was given that on an appointed day the fate of the accused person would be decided in the king's arena, a structure which was well deserved its name, for, although its form and plan were borrowed from afar, its purpose emanated solely from the brain of this man, who every crowned a king, knew no notion, tradition to which he owed more allegiance than pleased his fancy, and who engrafted on every adopted form of human thoughts and action and rich growth of his barbaric idealism. When all the people had assembled in the galleries, and the king, surrounded by his court, sat high on his throne of royal state, on one side of the arena, he gave signal. A door beneath him opened, and the accused subject stepped out into the amphitheater. Directly opposite of him, on the other side of the enclosed space, were two doors, exactly alike and side by side. It was the duty and the privilege of the person on trial to walk directly into those doors and open one of them. He could open neither door he pleased, and he was subject to no guidance or influence, but of that of the aforementioned impartial and incorruptible chance. If he opened the one, there came out of it a hungry tiger, a fierce and more cruel than to be procured, and which immediately sprung upon him and tore into pieces as a punishment of his guilt. The moment that the case of the trial of the criminal was thus decided, doleful iron bells were clanged, great wails went up from the hired mourners posted on the outer rim of the arena, and the vast audience, which bowed heads and cast hearts, whined slowly from their homeward way, mourning greatly that one so young and fair, or old and respected, can have merited so dear a fate. But if the accused person opened the other door, there came forth from it a lady, the most suitable of his years and station, that his majesty could select among his fair subjects, and to this lady he was immediately married, as a reward of his innocence. It mattered not that he might already possess a wife and family, or that his affections might be engaged upon an object of his own selection. The king allowed no such subordinate arrangements to interfere with his great scheme of retribution and reward. The exercises, as in the other instance, took place immediately in the arena. Another door opened beneath the king, and a priest, followed by a band of choristers and dancing maidens, blowing joyous airs on golden horns, treading the infinite measure, advanced to where the pair stood side by side, and the wedding was promptly and cheerfully solemnized. Then the gay brass bells rang forth their merry peals. The people shouted glad hurrahs, and the innocent man, preceded by children strewing flowers on his path, led his bride to his home. This was the king's semi-barbaric method of administering justice. Its perfect fairness is obvious. The criminal could not know out of which door would come the lady. He opened either he pleased, without having the slightest idea whether in the next instance he was to be devoured or married. On some occasions the tiger came out of window, and on some the other. The decision of the tribunal were not only fair, they were positively determinate. The accused person was instantly punished if he found himself guilty, and if innocent, he was rewarded on the spot, whether he liked it or not. There was no escape for the judgments of the king's arena. The institution was a very popular one. When the people gathered together on one of the days of great trials, they knew whether they would witness a bloody slaughter or a glorious wedding. This element of uncertainty lent an interest to the occasion which it could not otherwise have attained. Thus, the masses were entertained and pleased, and the thinking part of the community could bring no charge of unfairness against his plan. For did not the accused person have the whole matter in his whole hands? The semi-barbaric king had a daughter, blooming as his most florid fancies, and with a soul fervent and imperious as his own. As is usual in such cases, she was the apple of his eye, and was loved by him above all humanity. Among his quarters was a young man, in that fineness of blood and lowness of station common to the conventional heroes of romance who love royal maidens. His royal maiden was well satisfied with her lover, for he was handsome and brave to a degree unsurpassed in all of this kingdom, and she loved him with an ardor that had enough of barbarism in it to make an exceedingly warm and strong. This love affair moved unhappily for many months, until one day the king happened to discover its existence. He did not hesitate or waver to regard to his duty in the premises. The young was immediately cast into prison, and a day was appointed for his trial in the king's arena. This, of course, was a especially important occasion, and His Majesty, as well as all the people who greatly interested in the workings of the development of the trial. Never before had such a case occurred. Never before had the subject dared to love the daughter of the king. And after years, such things became commonplace enough. But then, they were in no slight degree novel and startling. The tiger cages of the kingdom were searched for the most savage and relentless beasts, from which the fiercest monster might be selected for the arena, and the ranks of the maiden youth and beauty throughout the land were carefully surveyed by competent judges, in order that the young man might have a fitting bride. The case fit did not determine for him a different destiny. Of course, Everyone saw that the deed in which the accused was charged had been done. He loved the princess, and neither he, she, nor anyone else thought of denying the fact. But the king would not think of allowing any fact of this kind to interfere with the workings of the tribunal, in which he took great delight and satisfaction. No matter how unfair it turned out, the youth will be disposed of. The king will take this. No matter how the affair turned out, the youth will be disposed of, and the king will take the aesthetic pleasure in watching the course of events, which he will determine whether or not the young man had done wrong in allowing himself to love the princess. The appointed day arrived. From far and near the people gathered and thronged the great galleries of the arena, and the crowds, unable to gain admittance, massed themselves against the outside walls. The king and his court were in their places, opposite the twin doors, those fateful portals, so terrible in their similarity. All was ready. The signal was given. The door beneath the royal party opened, and the lover of the princess walked into the arena. Tall, beautiful, fair, his appearance was greeted with a low hum of admiration and anxiety. Half the audience did not know the grand a youth had lived among them. No wonder the princess loved him. What a terrible thing for him to be there. As the youth advanced into the arena, he turned, as the custom was, to bow to the king, but he did not think at all of the royal personage. His eyes were fixed upon the princess, who sat to the right of her father. Had it not been for the novelty of barbarianism in her nature, it is probable that the lady would not have been there, but her intense and fervent soul would not allow her to be absent on an occasion in which she was terribly interested. From the moment that the decree had gone forth that her lover, she decided his fate in the king's court. She thought of nothing, day or night, but this great event and various subjects connected with it, possessed of more power, influence, and force of nature than anyone who had ever been interested in such a case. She had done what no other person had done. She had possessed herself of the secret of the doors. She knew in which the two rooms that lay beneath the doors stood the cage of the tiger, with its open front, in which waited the lady. Through these thick doors, heavily curtained with skins on the inside, it was impossible for any noise or suggestion to come from within to a person who should approach to raise the latch on one of them. But gold and the power of a woman's will had brought the secret to the princess. Not only did she know in which room stood the lady ready to emerge, all blushing and radiant, should her door be opened, but she knew who the lady was. It was one of the fairest and loveliest of the damsel of the court, who had been selected as the reward of accused youth. Should he have proven innocent of the crime of aspiring to be as one above him, the princess hated her. Often she had seen, or imagined that she had seen, this fair creature throwing glances of admiration upon the person of her lover, and sometimes she thought these glances were perceived, and even returned. Now and then she had seen them talking together. It was but for a moment or two, but much can be said in a brief space. It may have not been on most unimportant topics, but how could she have known that? The young girl was lovely, but she had dared to raise her eyes to the loved one of the princess. And with all intensity of the savage blood transmitted to her long lives of holy barbarian ancestors, she hated the woman who blushed and trembled behind the silent door. When her lover turned and looked at her, and his eye met hers as she sat there, paler and white than anyone in the vast ocean of ancient faces above her, he saw that the power of quick perception, which is given to those souls, are one. That she knew behind which door crouched the tiger, and behind which stood the lady. He had expected her to know. He understood her nature. His soul was assured that she would never rest until she made plain to herself this thing, hidden to all the onlookers, even to the king. The only hope for the youth, in which there was any element of certainty, was based upon the success of the princess in discovering this mystery. And the moment he looked upon her, he saw she had succeeded. As in his soul he knew she would succeed. Then there was a quick and anxious glance, asked the question, which? It was plain to her as if he shouted it from where he stood. There was not an instant to be lost. The question asked in a flash, it to be answered in another. Her right arm lay on a cushioned parapet before her. She raised her hand and made a slight quick movement toward the right. No one but her lover saw her. Every eye was fixed on the man in the arena. He turned with a firm and rapid step. He walked across the empty space. Every heart stopped beating. Every breath was held. Every eye was fixed immovably upon that man. Without the slightest hesitation, he went to the door on the right and opened it. Now, the point of the story is this. Did the tiger come out of that door, or did the lady? The more we reflect upon this question, the harder it is to answer. It involves one of a study of the human heart, which leads us to the divisive mazes of passion, out of which it is difficult to find our path. Think of it, fair reader, not as if discussion of the question depended upon yourself, but upon the hot-blooded semi-barbaric princess, her soul at a white heat beneath the combined fires of despair and jealousy. She had lost him, but who should save him, or who should have him? How often in her waking hours and in her dreams had she started the wild horror and covered her face with her hands as she thought of her lover opening the door on the other side, always waited the cruel fangs of the tiger. But how much often had she seen him at the other door? How, in her grievous reverences, had she gashed her teeth, torn her hair, when she saw the start of the rapper's delight as he opened the door of the lady? How her soul had burned in agony, which had seemed rushed to meet the woman, with her flashing cheek and sparkling eye of triumph. When she had seen him led her forth, his whole frame kindled with the joy of the recovered life. When she had heard the glad shouts of the multitude and wild ringing of happy bells, when she had seen the priest and his joyous followers advance to the couple and make them man and wife before her very eyes, and when she had seen them walk away together upon the paths of flowers, followed by the tremendous shouts of glorious multitude, in which her one despairing shriek was lost and drowned. Would it not be better for him to die at once, or go wait for her in the blessed regions of a semi-barbaric ferocity? And yet, that awful tiger, those shrieks, that blood. Her decision had been indicated in an instant. It had been made days after, days and nights of anguish deliberation. She had known that she would be asked, and she had decided that she would answer. And without the slightest hesitation, she had moved her hand to the right. The question of her decision is one not to be lightly considered, and it is not for me to proceed to set myself up as the person able to answer it, and so I leave it with you. How came out the open door, the lady or the tiger?